Hello. Hi, everybody. Glad you're here on this incredibly depressing day. Yeah, there you go. There it is, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. I see you brought the show downstairs. This is, I'm so happy we're among friends because this is not a scripted conversation. We're just going to meander in different ways, which is usually the way Sara and I work together. And we'll talk about the exhibition first, especially from her point of view. And then you know, we'll have a little bit more of a formal sort of post-introduction of Sara in terms of what she's done for us here at the church. And then after the sobbing, we will have
There's no
to
crying
drink.
in contemporary art.
Oh. Anyway, in order to sort of get my head around what should on the surface seem like an easy topic, which is humor, because it's something we all know, and it's something we've all experienced, and it goes deep into our lives, etc. Is also something that when it comes to the visual arts becomes a little bit more complicated in terms of identifying not so much what we mean by it as the various forms that it takes. And so as an exercise, I was just kind of going through, you know, Googling definitions of humor, comedy, things like that. And there were some things that struck me as might be a framework, not specific to the show, but just general. It might have some things. So bear with me while I just do. These are all notes, so they're not even full sentences. But, you know, when you do comedy, words like amusing, comic, droll, entertaining, hilarious, playful, pleasant, whimsical show up. The idea is, in terms of comedy, is to indulge or allow someone to do something that may be silly or foolish, but not harmful or dangerous. I'm saying this is, yeah, this is where it gets interesting. Sarcastic, satiric, ironic, sardonic means marked by bitterness and a power or will to cut or sting. Sarcastic implies an intentional infliction of pain by derision, taunting, reprobation, or ridicule.
Sometimes justified.
There's nothing that's following that would say different. Being silly and having a lighthearted attitude helps us cope with stress. And be able to laugh at ourselves and break our habits of taking ourselves too seriously.
Yes.
Right? Irony refers to a clash between expectations and outcomes. The irony of betrayal is that when you are betrayed, you sometimes end up betraying yourself. This introduces irony, which is, in literature, is when the audience is aware of something tragically flawed about the character that the character is not aware of.
Which just to jump in for a moment, I mean, I think a perfect example of that is Donahue that's upstairs, which is the mother whose son is playing with nunchucks made of tampons. Because, I mean, that's about our understanding. It's the misuse of the material, but it's also about the fact that, I mean, we know in a couple of years he'll never play with that again.
He also won't get hurt by it.
Indeed, indeed, important.
It actually is a brilliant children's toy. I mean,
what was the tampon industry thinking?
Yeah, exactly. You know, just to finish the thought about irony in humor is saying something that means its opposite. Comedy involves misunderstandings that lead to funny situations with the goal of making people laugh. Comedy entertains through honest depictions of daily life. Burlesque entertains through farcical distortions and absurdity. Dadaism, in the face of chaos of World War I, created rupture with social conventions through humor, derision, and irreverence. Surrealism, through dreams and irrationality, aligned with the psychoanalytic. Pop art, playfully ambiguous celebration of misplaced values. Consumerism, imagistic shallowness, etc. Contemporary art is darker, black humor as social and political protest, denunciation of rules imposed by society, focusing on inequality, consumption, waste, environmental issues, etc. Street art is subversive humor, secretive, defacing property used as weapons of political protest. Now, according to Freudian psychoanalytics, humor arises from our ability to play. It allows the principle of reality to coexist with the principle of pleasure, which I think is an amazing concept. So, anyway, those are sort of things that begin to try to find how to move into what we're going to talk about in regards to your show, or what you're going to talk about in regards to your show. So do you want to start someplace, or?
Sure. Yay!
That was Google. That's the brilliance of Google.
I mean, I think Freud is a really good place to start. I mean, that passage is a lovely passage by Freud. And, this idea of...
When a British person says lovely, you are fucked.
The other thing we do is we say, ooh, that's brave. And people think, oh, that's a compliment. No. So, the thing about Freud was that, Freud said that humor comes out of the fear of castration. And it's one of the ways of dealing with it. And since women cannot be afraid of castration, obviously Freud hadn't been to Africa and talked about genital mutilation, but that's for another event.
We'll bring you back.
Part 2.
Cannot wait.
But, so the whole idea was women couldn't be funny. Thanks, Freud. But, 2007, Christopher Hitchens doubles down and says that men need humor to seduce women, therefore women can't be funny because it wouldn't work if we were. So,
what wouldn't work? The seduction, because it would become a competition or something?
Yeah, or we wouldn't laugh at your jokes.
I'm used to that.
So, this whole idea about women not being funny, not being as funny as men, is something that I personally, and I actually do want to write a book about this well, not about that, but about this idea of women and humor in contemporary art. I'm really interested in this idea that, we know that Playboy went after feminism saying feminists were unsexy. But I think I think Playboy also went after feminism, probably mainstream culture, saying feminists were also unfunny, that they couldn't take a joke. And I think all of us in the room know when somebody says you can't take a joke, okay, maybe you can't, but most probably that joke isn't funny to start with. So it's, I mean, I'm really interested in these edges, and I'm really interested in the fact that and I think many women in this room probably think that feminist art is really hilarious. I mean, Valley Export's Genital Panic, when she took a submachine gun, cut the crotch out of her trousers, and went into a porno theater and spread her legs. I mean, that's pretty funny. I mean, it's pretty ballsy, but it's really funny to say, okay, here's the real thing. But it's all about these power plays. And, you know, as we were mentioning in the garden, I mean, a lot of theory around humor, and we're not going to do that tonight, but Bakhtin is somebody who came out in Russia and said, masquerade, the carnivalesque, this is the way you deal with power. This is the way you speak truth to power. You do it through the plausible deniability of humor. And in that, the show was a much greater revelation now than when I started. I knew it was a good subject. We talked about humor, and I'm going to be perfectly honest here. My partner in crime...
Please don't.
My partner in crime, Eric Fischl, was the one, and I don't know if it was a joke, but you said, oh, we should just show women. And I was just like, that's a brilliant idea. So yet again, Eric's brilliance just, you know, is just everywhere.
Yeah. I'm glad it's finally turning towards me. I was so afraid this was going to go in another direction.
But I mean, you know, I think humor is so important. And so my grandmother was a really, really heavy smoker. And if you really made her laugh, she would start coughing. And my brother and I, it was like a badge of honor to get her to cough. And she would do this coughing, laughing, and she loved it. And, you know, early on, that ability to make somebody laugh, somebody you love, laugh. I mean, there's no greater thing. There's no greater thing. I mean, shared laughter is glorious. It builds coalitions. But I do think that humor can also be used divisively. And in 2009, I went to my first and only rodeo in Tucson, Arizona, without my husband. He decided not to go on that trip where we could have met. But oh no, we had to wait a few more years. But, you know, they were using this borderline racist humor about Obama. And it was horrendous. It was horrendous to listen to people laughing for something I found objectionable. And so I think these are some of the really interesting and really complicated sets of issues that are here.
And to double that complexity, what you put together is a show of visual art, which is object making, and with long histories as to its purpose and its significance and its, you know, the issues around qualities that it possesses or manifests and things like that. It's an interesting thing in terms of humor, which some kinds of humor are immediate, you know, in terms of getting it, and you know, they're not subtle on purpose, right? They're something that is meant to be a relief, you know, right away kind of relief thing. There's certainly art that you don't need to go back to, and that even if you went back to it, it might not. Either the context changed, the situation you were in that changed at the moment that you first experienced it, or or when you go back, it's just it's the other qualities of the object aren't generative and sustainable that way.
So this is something Eric and I love to do. Let's talk about Fragonard.
About who?
Fragonard.
Okay.
So if we think about The Swing by Fragonard, I mean, it's on every chocolate box. In Britain, we actually talk about chocolate box art because chocolate boxes are really important, especially at Christmas and Easter. So, on the surface, beautiful foliage, beautiful women, exquisite dress, and obviously a gentleman who is enamored with this woman he's seeing. The joke is 18th century women didn't wear underwear. She's got her leg stretched out and she's kicking off her slipper and she's giving him, let's say, a bird's eye view of paradise. And I mean, that makes that painting, that tension, you don't need to know about that to like the painting, but that tension makes it so much better. So while I think you're right that there's some work that, maybe you need to see it once. But I always think the more time you spend with it, the more interesting it is. And this leads me to something that interests me in this show, which is I think women and men have very different reactions to this show. And, Kate Hardy's large maxi pad. I mean, maybe it's just being a woman. It's just funny. I mean, we know it's funny, and we all know that, we all have like our menstruation horror story, which at the time probably mortified us and now probably makes us laugh. Have a few drinks, maybe a gummy, and all of a sudden, all of this, because it's a shared experience we've never talked about. And I think that that's part of the interest of this show. I had a friend who used to say, if men had periods, they would come in their first day and they'd be high-fiving each other like, I'm on the rag. And, we just don't do that. And so it's great to finally be celebrating that. And I think it's important we do that. I'll stop talking about menstruation.
No. Please. Please go on.
No. Okay.
I love this idea that men would do that.
Oh, you totally would. You would. Yeah, no, you would.
How's it going today? Good.
How's the cramps?
Yeah.
Well, the other one is the Patty Cheng, which is the video piece from the 90s of Patty Cheng telling, and I love it because, I mean, first of all, it's this just total confrontation about the narrative, which is that when her aunt died, they made commemorative plates for everybody, but she got given a smaller, cheaper one because she's a girl. And so, she places it on her head, and then she starts to cut into what appears to be her bra, and she has a cantaloupe in there. And, that is, I think, a piece that I've seen women stand in front of and go, oh my God, that's horrible and that's hilarious. And I think most men, it's just like, yeah, not going to deal with that.
I was actually with some women who weren't going to deal with it either.
Oh, okay.
It's not a easy.
It's uncomfortable.
It's watching
uncomfortable.
a woman eat her breast is pretty intense. Yeah. But might have been Clement Greenberg. Back in the 50s, proclaimed as an inflammatory thing at a party, so it was very deliberate, but claimed that women can't be great artists because they're too obsessed with their bodies.
Yeah, but male artists are obsessed with our bodies too.
No, we're obsessed with women's bodies.
No, exactly. I mean,
And you can't have two different sexes obsessed with the same body.
well, no, you can. That's called
I should have done
double
that as a
consciousness.
question.
No, it's time for some feminist theory. That's called double consciousness. I mean, that is about the fact that every woman looks at herself as a woman would look at it. And let's be honest, most women dress for women.
Yes.
Or gay men who have great taste. Yeah. But if you really think about it, I mean, we also dress with an external guard, which is that of how men will look at us. So, I mean, that kind of double consciousness, I think all women live with. I don't have children. I hope a younger generation is getting away from that. I just don't know. I love that fact, and you told me about that. And I think you said that was in 9th Street Women, was it? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the only book I've read.
Hey, I just gave you one. I'm going to give you a quiz. Yeah, so sure. I mean, women's bodies. Yeah, you know, breasts, they get in the way.
I'll give
What
you
can
an
you do?
example. Today I was looking at the show.
Yeah.
And I was looking at Elisa Yaskovich's fantastic painting, the portrait of the young woman staring out very blankly, but an extraordinary painted mouth, very expressive mouth. But she's looking out and she's flipping with two hands, bird with these beautiful painted pink fingernails, right? And she's just very coldly staring. And so, of course, the first reaction is, you know, I'm the one she's saying fuck you to, right? And, you know, for whatever reason, it's, you know, independence or, you know, whatever, the male gaze, blah, 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 et cetera. But it's a size, and especially the way it was cropped, where her shoulders are and stuff, that I began to think that it could also be interpreted as a mirror. And if it was a mirror, she's also saying fuck you to herself.
Which I think is a really interesting idea, and I think that ties us back to Monica Banks's work. I mean, you know, Monica has those beautiful ceramics, and one appears to be the initials LSR, but of course, if you look closely, it says loser, and then the other side says if only, but it actually says if they only knew. So, I mean, again, that kind of self-doubt, I think that's a brilliant interpretation. I wish I'd thought of it.
That's why I'm here.
I do think that this is when we get down to this problem that, you know, humor is, it's complicated and it's personal and it's cultural. And I just said this to Eric, but this is true. I did not understand or like Benny Hill until I lived in France for 8 years. And what living in France for 8 years taught me about Benny Hill is that his timing is impeccable. And I appreciated that. But I think in an English-speaking country, I was just like, oh, he's horrible. And he is horrible. I mean, you know, it's incredibly sexist. But there is something about his timing which is really interesting. And there's also something about the first 2 months I was in Paris, I was taken to see a French comic. And my French was not good enough to understand him, apart from one thing he did about Mitterrand needing to move right, but he went left all the way around until he got right. Political joke, which was funny. But there was so much joy to laugh physically with other people, even though I didn't actually understand the jokes. And that was something else that, like, that physical well-being of laughing was very, very interesting. So that was a dead end, and I apologize.
Yeah, so
How are you?
Yeah, so what are you up to these days?
So I had wanted to start off telling jokes, but we're not going to. But I
think we're doing pretty good. I mean, we got an audience that's hanging with us here, so.
I did want to ask you, Eric, what is the first comedian you remember, and what was it that made you laugh?
Well, the first of all, I grew up with television, so the comedies that I saw were TV shows, right? And they were Howdy Doody would be considered one of them, and I actually was. To my regret, my mother got me and my sister tickets for the Howdy Doody show, which was broadcast out of the NBC building. And it was for my fourth, fifth birthday, something like that. Must have been like fifth birthday. And I had been, like religiously watching the Howdy Doody show since we got a television, and which was black and white. So in the black and white TV, small screen, Buffalo Bob was wearing his, doe skin outfit, fringed outfit, and the peanut gallery was like a huge stadium in terms of feel. The puppet stage and stuff like that was vast. Everything had a whole other scale to it. And my mother takes me and my sister in, and they lead us into the room, which was a small office that, small office-y type space that the bleachers were 3 steps high. So it's like this high. And, we're brought in and we're sitting down with, the other kids, which also seemed like there were a smaller number of kids to fill the space. So it seemed like a smaller audience. Anyway, but we're brought there and actually are in the front row. And we're looking across this office-y space to a revolving door. And all of a sudden, Buffalo Bob comes out of the revolving door, and he's wearing a blue outfit with blue fringe on it. It just read different, obviously in black and white. So I'm already processing stuff like reality versus what I thought it was. And then Clarabelle comes out. And Clarabelle starts chasing him around the room, squirting and stuff. And at one point sort of brushes the stage where Howdy Doody would show up, and it was like wobbly. And I started crying. And I was uncontrollably crying. And they came and pulled me out of there, and my sister, who never forgave me. Because, and the thing is, we had to sit out in the hallway because my mother had gone off to shop. She was going to, or drink or whatever she was going to do, but she was going to come back and get us. So my sister is, looking at me and screaming at me and telling me to shut up and stop crying. I'm dealing with the harsh realities of fantasy versus, so that was my first comedy.
This was impactful.
Yeah.
We now understand where Bad Boy comes from.
And you were going to tell yours, right?
So
which is really where Bad Boy comes from.
Yeah. There's a comedian called Billy Connolly who is from Glasgow, and he was outrageous. He was also a folk singer. He's still alive. and my parents were gifted a record, and we listened to it. I must have been 8 or 9, and we listened to it one Sunday afternoon, and my mother couldn't stop laughing. And at one point, it was a very satirical take on that part about the crucifixion. And she just said, "This is so funny, but I will go to hell." And I remember just being like, that is hilarious. But I recently told my husband that Billy Connolly is actually the first man I ever saw naked. Billy Connolly was in the opera, and the Scottish Opera Company is in Glasgow, point of pride, not in the capital, Edinburgh. And so there's this Theatre Royal, it seats probably 500, 600. They did a matinee for school children, so you've got 500, 600 school children in there. And it's De Vleedemouse, and the curtain comes up, and somebody is in bed, and he gets wakened, and Billy Connolly threw back the covers, jumped up, and was butt naked. And 500, 600 kids just start screaming. And about 100 teachers are trying to cover eyes. And it's I guess it probably should be traumatic, but it was such a point of rebellion, and he was such a hero that it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And he has a small part in The Aristocrats, which, if you haven't seen the film...
Don't go with that small part thing, okay?
Sorry, apologies. You see, context is everything. And that's something else that's important, I think, for the show. I mean, you know, one of the things I started to think about when I started working on this show was the idea of a kind of funny abstraction. And that is not to, I mean, that's a kind of simplistic way of putting it together. But I think there is, there's freedom, there's joy, there's the unexpected in abstraction. And I became really interested in that. And Bastien, I had a wonderful studio visit with Bastien, and we obviously loved the piece that's upstairs, but that context with the Kate Hardy is an amazing first wall. It's really, really wonderful. And I'm also really grateful to Amand, who's here, because Amand allowed us to put those two pieces up there where they kind of look like a marriage portrait to me. And that was really exciting. And we did take liberties with this show. I mean, we used the space in ways we've never used it before. We hung very high for the Linda Bengelis, for Amand's piece. There were moments where we allowed ourselves perhaps more frivolity and whimsy in the way we were installing than
you also
perhaps
created an intimate space up on the mezzanine as well. So.
Which became useful because, I mean, we jokingly called that the kind of Vatican secret museum, because we've obviously got the Martha Edelstein with full male nudity. Edelheit, thank you. Mm-hmm. With full male nudity, and we also have the Hiji Shin, and then, you know, we also have Chicken Knickers by Sarah Lucas. So it did become this area where we could say to families, look, there's work of sensitive nature. If you would like to avoid that, please know it's just in this one area. And I think that's important also to, you know, to allow people to see at their own rate and to their own comfort. Mm-hmm. But I really like it. I mean, I'm surprised, and you know, I think we've always been very sensitive when we've built walls, because, you know, Lee Skolnick, it's his baby up there to a certain degree. And, you know, Lee, I've always been nervous, like, Lee, you know, hope you like the walls, and he really liked these walls, so that was really good.
I think the breakup of the exhibition's fantastic. It's both intimate and expansive, and being able to accomplish that. Yeah.
And you know, I think that there's also important work in the exhibition. I mean, I think the Wendy Red Star is an amazing piece. I mean, the fact that there are 24 novels in a series of erotic cowboy and Indian writing. I mean, it's really important to go back and kind of invest that and look at it and see. You know, and I also think in looking at someone like Cindy Sherman, I mean, that was a complicated decision to make. I had a great conversation with Cindy where she said she thinks her newest work is her most funny. But it is.
Is this the new? That's
No.
No, this is older.
No,
right?
this is a
13 or
clown.
something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
This she's got the same image over at Longhouse
Oh, really?
on 3 skateboards.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm looking at it going, what the fuck? What's? I'm trying to put it together. What's the, image can go anywhere? Is that the thing?
Postmodernism.
I think that's where we're going with that, right?
But you know, the other thing I would say about this show, 2 summers ago we did the weaving show together, and we installed a work by Judy Chicago, and we installed it the week after the Supreme Court ruling on Roe versus Wade, and all of a sudden that piece looked vastly different after that ruling. And, there's a wonderful book, and the title is Art After Satire, which, basically is a re-argumentation of some of the things you've talked about to do with contemporary art. I guess it's the Songtang definition of camp, that you can't camp. And in the current political arena, satire is difficult to do because, it just is. And so I still think it's important for all of us to focus on the ways that humor can delight us individually and also create community. I think that's really important. And in some ways, I think that's one of the things that I wanted to do with this show, was to create community in thinking about how women have used this in very, very different ways. So, yeah.
Another favorite piece of mine in the show is Dana Schutz's Shower.
Slow motion shower.
Is it slow motion? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I just think it's hysterical. I'm surprised it's called slow motion because it's so frenetic, and clearly somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to get fully clean, and you can see her washing everywhere. And it's fantastic. It's manic and whatnot, beautifully painted. It again feels like a kind of painting that would hold that, because the painting itself is so beautifully done. And oh my God, look at how she did that shower head and stuff like that. So that's a piece that gives me pleasure.
But that's, the whole idea of a woman at her toilet, a woman in her bath. Degas, all of the 19th century, Bathsheba at her bath. Any number of women. This is a trope that's very old in art history, but obviously this is a way of, because that circular bit at the bottom, which indicates the bath, is just really interesting and kind of fascinating.
And in what regard?
Well, you know, if you look
other
at the
than it connotes
Degas,
the bath.
the Degas always has those
round-
rounded of the big pans that they used to sort of take baths
Yeah,
in.
I didn't make that association, but I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have to thank Sherry. I mean, Sherry was really responsible for bringing in that loan, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful to her for that and many, many other helps along the way. But it's a beautiful piece of painting. And it's interesting to see the different painting in this show. I mean, you know, just the loudness of the Catherine Bernhardt, which is the pink panther with the two sharks and the croc and the cigarette butts and
yeah.
any number of other things. That is the first work of art that I brought into the building where I thought, dear God, this may not work. And it was really interesting because the first time Eric and I installed the church, which was the car show, I said to Eric, we are taking 3 weeks. And you said to me, we don't need 3 weeks. And I said, no, we don't, but we don't know how contemporary art will look in the space. And contemporary art, everything we've brought into the church has really been wonderful. It's an extraordinary, flexible, beautiful space upstairs. And that's why when we brought in the Catherine Bernhardt, it was just like, oh my God, I think the building may be rejecting this. And that was really exciting and very frightening. And we managed to get it upstairs. We did try it in a couple of places, but we managed to get it upstairs. Carrie, thank you. Ward, thank you.
Yeah.
And it fits in just fine, which is a testament to the space upstairs and the excellent exhibitions that are going to come in the future, which I look forward to seeing.
What I like about that painting, besides how strange the image is and how playful it's rendered, is how deceptively complicated it is painted. I mean, I look at it trying to figure out what went first, because the luminosity of the paint, something where you think well, that had to go first, because if it goes over something, that's going to kill it, et cetera, and you look at it, and then it's, you know, it's sprayed and as well as washed and things like that, and it's this broad language of description, very simple renderings, et cetera, and it stays fresh. Yeah. Plus, it's so fucking weird.
It is. I mean, but so is the Judith Lynn-Hartley's. I mean, that is such.
I did not notice until today that fire was not in the fire pit. I mean, I always assumed that they, you know, roasting marshmallows over the fire pit, and I looked today, and it's the forest is on fire, and there's a cold can, you know, pot on top of an burning, yeah.
Well, that's like the clarinets.
What did she mean by that?
You want me to talk for the artist?
Yeah, no, I think it's deceptive as well in terms, you know, what reads as sort of abstract language of description of painting or something along those lines, where you take it as a compositional decision. But it's also carrying an image, it's also carrying significance and stuff like that, and so it's layered in a way that all seems on the surface, and yet it's you don't read it as, you know, in that way. You actually have to unpack it. So,
well, the way the forest is painted also is just exquisite, and I mean, in some ways, that kind of zigzaggy pattern you get in the fire, you also get repeated in the trees.
It looks like backdrop rather than forest on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the things you don't notice, I mean, the Martha Edelheit, you know, the fact that the central woman, there's no chair for her to be sitting in, then the
Can
clarinets.
we talk about that painting
Sure.
for a minute? Can you unpack it a little bit for me?
I mean, it's so many
What's
levels.
it called? The View?
It's the view to the Cross Bronx Highway from Highbridge Park. So, description of a landscape. What dominates the painting? 4 large nudes, none of which are really in the same scale. One of the details I adore is that the bottoms on the female figure to the left and the male figure on the right, they're flat as though they're leaning against something, but they're not leaning against something. There's a woman in the center who is very obviously reposing on a chair, but there's no chair there. And then there's 2 clarinets underneath it. And then if you look at what is around the most colorful part of the painting, which is the landscape, it looks on the bottom like a window ledge, but on the sides it looks like a frame. And so it's just this constant puzzle of where your eye lands. If your eye lands to a certain part, that looks like a window, or it can look like a painting, and then these very odd and very unsexy bodies. It's really
and also
interesting.
multiracial.
And
right?
multiracial.
Yeah. And when was that done? Is that in the
70s.
70 or 70s?
70s.
Yeah.
1970s.
I mean, it also kind of looks like it's echoing in its own weird way. You know, that movie Bob, Ted, Carol, Alice, or whatever that's called, the foursome thing is sort of like you come on this image as though there's something sexual, you know, some menage a cat thing going on, et cetera, except there's like zero feeling towards that, you know, so it's emptied out of that. It also seems like some kind of, you know, very casual scene, as you say, that has no gravity to it whatsoever. Nothing is rooted. There's no shadows. You know, it's an incredible concept for. I mean, I think she probably was challenging the language of figurative painting as at the same time she was commenting on other things.
I also find it really interesting because in many ways the most posed figure is that male figure. He has this amazing hand. I mean, it's huge to start with, but it's really, I mean, there's something, I mean, he's in counterposto. He's really in many ways the kind of the most challenging and I would say posed figure.
Yeah. The weightless woman's wearing a ring.
I didn't see that.
And that made me see if I could see whether there was like wedding rings on anybody's, you know, if there was like another thing. And you were talking about the guy, there were no rings on him either. There were actually no other rings there but on her. Yeah. And it wasn't a wedding ring, it was just a ring, so, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in there to wonder about, which I like as an experience of a work of art, yeah. And anyway, where do you want to go with this? Do you want to open it up to
let's open
see
it
if
up to questions, if there are
anybody
any.
has some other thoughts? We've got, Patty McCormick over there.
Patty, just wait. I think Kristen's going to bring a microphone. She's over here.
Thanks. Sara, is it your view that
Turn
humor,
your thing on.
that
bottom.
humor is always transgressive, and that it's more risky for women to transgress in that way?
That's a great question, Patty. Again, I think humor is cultural, and I grew up with transgressive humor. I mean, perhaps I'm more drawn to transgressive humor. I think that I do believe humor has been the place where individuals on the margin have spoken truth to power. And I've just always been interested in speaking truth to power, starting with our teachers in Scotland who needed truth spoken to them. So it may be me that is more interested in that, but you know, if you look at female comics, I mean, you know, we've got Amy Schumer, we've got Sarah Silverman, thank you. I love those women, they're amazing. But, you know, not so long ago, the all-female version of Ghostbusters, you know, there was a social media campaign that was vicious. So, you know, humor is always difficult. I think, and maybe that's just my point of view, I think humor is always difficult. So, Kristen is coming.
Sara, congrats. It's a really amazing show. Thank you for that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Louise Lawler. I think that's one of the funniest works, and it's
Yeah.
very pointed and timely.
Yeah, I mean, so Louise Lawler, it's in the library, and essentially she put a very famous male artists, they're all white, they're all male, they're all important, and she makes them into bird calls. So literally, archfucker, Saul Lewitt. And it's hilarious, and I mean, she says it started off as a joke she did with her friend, and then they kind of grew it, and it's charming and delightful, and yeah, it's just brilliant, and sure it's a bit biting, but it's really funny, and it's transformative. And I think perhaps that's something else about humor. It's transformative. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, that was a joy to be able to do that. And I have to thank Sam Haven in the back, because if we'd had our way, Sam would have printed that list using birdseed on that press. But it was a step too far for the studio, but I'm so grateful to Sam for going there, and we have some really lovely block letters that are great. So Sam, thank you.
Yeah, I think that.
Hi, of course, thank you so much. It's always a wonderful experience to hear both of you speak, and I appreciate it. I wanted to just mention that one of the main functions of humor is to pierce anxiety, and it really breaks up anxiety. I have a quick joke that illustrates it, which is these partisans are being lined up on a wall by communist troops to shoot them, and as the men are raising their rifles, one fellow says, wait a minute, I want a blindfold," to which his partner says, "Shh, don't make trouble."
There's a question. Oh.
Thank you. That was really great. I just want to point out that humor is one of a million things that women were told we couldn't do. Driving, leading, cooking for big groups, painting, being funny. We've been told we can't do anything, really. And talking about menstruation, I think that's what's given women the resilience in the face of all of this negativity to say, we march on, kids. We just go through and carry on.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very sad you're leaving, but that's a separate story. Those are not my questions. So I have two
We're going to
questions.
get to the sad part.
Later, I get it. So first, these two separate questions. First, has there ever been a piece that has arrived and you've not hung it? And then the second thing is, so my theory after listening to you talk about this, that you have been storing like a squirrel for winter all the images that you wanted to show in this show for the last 20 years. This is my theory. That's all. Just want to know if it is.
Let me answer the first one, and then Eric and I can discuss the second one. I would say I've been storing half of these images. We came across some really amazing stuff. So, you know, it's making an exhibition is always a revelatory process. You discover and you refine, and there's always a back and forth. There are certainly things that I would have liked to be in this show that weren't in for any number of reasons. And there are certainly things that I didn't think of that when I started to look and talk, it became obvious that we were going to do it. So to talk about not installing a work, the only thing I can think of is last year, Caracamo. There was a work last year, and so...
You're talking about the boxing?
Yeah, the boxing show. This young artist who Eric had seen in the degree show,
Hunter.
Hunter
yeah,
in the window.
College. In the window.
She had a line of paper mache boxing gloves, and
No, they were bark.
they were bark.
Yeah.
Sorry, the shoes were paper mache. You're
Yeah,
right, they were
yeah,
bark. Sorry. And the shoes, and we tried them in various places, and we came to the conclusion that we'd really like to show the boxing gloves without the shoes. So I phoned her, and I said, look, you know, kind of short on space, thinking about the show, maybe thematically. And God bless her, she turned around and said no. And she had this amazing story, which was that it had been really difficult for her to go through her MFA program.
Yeah, let me just say that I came on this piece of work walking down the street from my doctor's office on 63rd or 4th Street. And there are these boxing gloves made out of birch bark hanging in the window of the gallery at Hunter College, along with these shoes. And, you know, thinking we're in the process of curating the boxing show and stuff, and I thought, oh, this would be great. I mean, you know, this is a MFA graduate. I think it was, she might even be a BFA, but she was, you know, somebody who's a graduate show. And how cool would that be for her to be, you know, in a show with well-known artists, et cetera, and plus their fabulous piece. But I, you know, it took forever to find her. I had to go through, which is not native to me, trying to find somebody on Insta, right? I came up with her brother, and who's an artist as well, and through him explained the show, and then he got her in touch, et cetera, et cetera. She apparently is, you know, very shy and reluctant, and part of the thing is that she's gun shy because she was always pushed aside within the class that she was in. She was always either overlooked or criticized for her choices in terms of the kinds of work she made, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, thank you. And so she did this piece as a statement about it, which was the, you know, the boxing gloves obviously representing her will to fight, and the shoes were representing her being stepped on, all the time being stepped on, and it was that, like, this was the battle. So when we approached her to see if we could drop the shoes, obviously that story came out, which was very poignant, and then Sara talked her out of it, right? And you talked her into letting us just do.
No,
No,
she.
we didn't do the shoes.
No, we did both.
We did.
We did both. Yeah, we definitely did both. And I mean, what?
Well, you don't have to yell at me.
But the interesting thing was, this animosity with her class was so great that they didn't want her in the show, so they put her in the window where Eric saw her. So karma's
Yeah.
a bitch. So that was one where understanding more about the piece, was one where we thought, we could do without the shoes, and then we were like, no way. So I don't think there's ever been anything else where we've kind of thought, ooh.
Yeah, we didn't. We didn't have a moment of thinking, oh, it was much better in photograph.
Yeah.
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 No, I don't think so either.
Are there?
I mean, we certainly have, restrictions in terms of what we can find as objects. But, there's certain limitations the building has. There's certain limitations that it has because of climate control or,
Getting it in
maximum
the door.
security prison or et cetera, or getting it in the door and those kind of things. But in terms of the things we are able to curate, yeah, they stay in the show.
Yeah. The
Thank you. Before I reveal how stupid and uneducated I am, I would like to report a little social psychological research that does show that people laugh not so much to the content of what they're hearing, but for social communication. Now to go on to my problem with the show.
okay.
I like to come here, and I did not appreciate boxing until you explained it, Eric. I thought it was kind of repulsive, actually. But then you explained it, I gained an appreciation. So I don't have a background in art. I don't have a background in comedy. I have never understood Howdy Doody. It just seemed totally silly. My father laughed at Jackie Gleason. I laughed at Lucille Ball. I identified
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah.
I laugh at Seinfeld and Oscar Wilde. I went through this show without somebody telling me what was going on. Most of it, I just didn't appreciate. And I think I'm typical of most people in this country and the world. I don't get it. So if you could say something about what I need to do, you all are more enlightened in intelligence than I am. And so if you could just enlighten me a little so I could get the show, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So first of all, I would say it is not that we are more enlightened versus you not being enlightened. I think that this is probably one of the most subjective shows we've ever done. So I understand that this is a difficult show. In the introductory text, I said sometimes humor isn't funny. And I think that there are times when things are serious and the only way to get them across, perhaps to a certain degree, is using exaggeration or using different tools like that, that kind of tip maybe a hat to something that's wrong with the world. I think that there's a lot in this show which is about kind of masquerade. So if I think about the North Wall, there's the work of Nina Kachadorian, where she did these, I mean, first of all, she just has the most wonderful nose. She's Armenian. But she did these self-portraits where she looks like she's a Dutch person. And all of that material comes out of bathroom toilets. So she only does that portrait series when she's on an airplane.
Airplane bathroom toilet.
Airplane bathroom toilets. And I mean, it is ridiculous. It's also kind of wonderful. the woman next to her, Shadi Gadirian, who is Iranian, she did this parody of 19th century very formal Iranian portraits, the Qatar portraits, which are very specific period of time when Iran starts to open up. And people started to hold things that showed their stature in life. And she does these historical portraits with contemporary items such as a vacuum cleaner or a boombox. You know, there's a lot of taking on of history in this show. And then I think there are moments of just joy. I mean, obviously here with the Joyce Penzato, we have a reference to Felix the Cat. But the informality of the way it's painted, for me, makes it seem much more approachable and kind of undermines some of the ways that individuals in cartoons see that. There's a finishing, a perfection to the cartoons that Joyce Penzato has not done. And then over in the corner there, Claire Watson's work, which are all made out of gloves. I mean, their creatureness is just really odd and surreal and wonderful. And again, it's about looking at certain parts and seeing different areas. So I'm happy to have a more one-on-one conversation, but really the show, this is one of the reasons that we started with weaving to do, I write extended labels for every single work of art. You don't need to read them, but they're there if you want them, and I explain a lot. Like the woman with the ice cream cone in her pocket and that, Olivia Loescher looked into 50 laws that are in one from each of the 50 states, which are still on the books. So in Alabama, you are not allowed to have an ice cream cone in your back pocket. And in Ohio, you are not supposed to undress in front of a male portrait. Those are on the books. Yep, it's on the books. I mean, talk about why we need a different way of making laws. You know, so, I mean, these kinds of things, for me, they point to the ridiculous, but there's also great enjoyment in pointing that out and sharing it. And that's perhaps some of the generosity that comes out. So those were some of the things we were trying to do. You know, you've got chicken knickers, which is funny. Obviously, Judy Hudson's piece, which is the only joke in the exhibition. I mean, obviously it's our riposte to Richard Prince. But that was one of the guiding principles of the show. And yeah, that's the extended labels. And we did have this conversation about art that we have to explain. But, you know, I kind of feel there's a lot of art we have to explain. That's a long question. Maybe one more, David?
So I'm a comment and two questions. Comment, I think, is one of the best shows that you guys have had at the church, so it's a wonderful swan song, and thank you for that. I guess an observation is that humor is, there's so many kinds of humor. I mean, it's not ha-ha. I mean,
You can scream.
so very few things are like ha-ha in the show. They're subtle, they're satiric, they're political, you know, some are gross funny. There's just a lot of, you know, kind of like a lot of shows you see, it's everything sort of hits you the same. You know, beautiful art or you know, wild art, but this just has so many different notes and tones and flavors. Each piece sort of has a different sense of humor to it. My next question is, I guess that was a comment too, but here comes the question. In discussing the work with some of the artists, obviously the ones you could still, I don't think you spoke to Joyce Penzato, hopefully, but the ones you did speak to, did you have interesting conversations with them about what was funny about the work, or I'd love to hear any anecdotes about your conversations.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think there's a couple of artists who said, you know, I didn't really think it was funny, but in talking to it, you know, you sort of come around to it. And I think there's some artists in the show who sort of said, yeah, it's funny. Sometimes it's a kind of personal joke. So there's different ways. I mean, Judy Hudson with the you know, Playboy Advisor, supposedly up to the late 90s, Playboy Advisor was one of the most written to agonions. I mean, that's fascinating. So, you know, there are certainly some who set out to be funny, and I think there's also some who saw in context, and again, all about context, that there was something there that could kind of be pulled out of their work. And that doesn't mean that the work is just that, but it means that there's shades and angles to it. So there were a lot of diverse conversations. But Pippi's definitely one who should probably say something. Pippi, David, maybe David can hand your... Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say I'm forever grateful to you for showing me the humor in my work, because I did not see it, and now I see it everywhere. So thank you. I'm the woman walking across the field carrying the dresser on her back.
There's a number of artists here. Claire's right there. Almond's over there.
Could they raise their hands?
Yeah,
so we
they're
know
here.
who all's
So
here?
if you have questions, let's ask them.
Nice.
Party time.
I think so. So to wrap it up, pull it all together. I'm not good at saying goodbye, so I'm not going to. But I just say that I met Sara 20 some odd years ago when I started a scholarship program at Phoenix College, which was the junior college I went to, took my first art classes. And Sara was working as a curator at the Contemporary Museum, not the Contemporary, the Phoenix Art Museum, which was the only game in town. And she connected us so that my program was that I would bring world-renowned artists to come and jury these students' work at this community college, which is a context that they hadn't ever been exposed to, and also was a community of artists that were struggling with all kinds of issues, identity issues, gang violence, poverty, all different levels of stress and whatnot, and generally feeling completely out of place, like they had no community. Their parents or their posses or whatever didn't understand why they were going to an art school or taking art lessons, what pragmatic, et cetera, et cetera. So we came up with this idea that we would have the world-renowned artists would give a talk at the Phoenix Museum, and the students that were chosen by this artist work would be brought over to the museum on that day and displayed in the context of great art. And it was phenomenal, a very simple program that Sara was like, really making happen. because it was something where, parents and the kids' friends and all these people would come for that event and all of a sudden see that, oh, this is where he actually belongs. This is where she actually belongs. This is their community. And that would, the eyes would be open. And so it's really remarkable to see it, and thank you to Sara for that. And so I've known her since that beginning, and every time I would go out to Phoenix, of course, we would get together and stuff. You moved over to do these incredible shows over at Scottsdale Contemporary, and then time passes, and April and I are thinking about this place, and we're coming at it from a non-organizational space. We're coming as artists thinking, oh, this would be cool. And we could do this with it, and this would be great, and how simple was that? And, we'd send out a thing. We had someone advising us that, you probably should get a director. And so we sent out some notices, and got some response, not a tremendous amount of response. And we began to wonder if this was a bad idea all the way around. And then out of the blue, and the only reason I didn't reach out to Sara at the time was because I didn't know she was looking for a job. But she had heard about it, and she contacted us and came here and interviewed for it and blew us away. And so, we obviously hired her. So that's 2020, right? And the building's not finished yet. We're in a kind of state of trying to figure out what the hell this is, what we're going to do, how we're going to, do because we have a grand vision, all the arts. We want to do everything. We want, we want it to be, so many levels of creative experience and stuff. And so, obviously all your years of knowing that that's not possible, and there actually are, hours and days in a year, and, et cetera, that there's a way of rolling stuff out, began to sort of put it into a shape that made sense in terms of the practicality of it. And then COVID happened. And so right when we're opening, we're closing. And what was amazing, amazing to me was watching her clear head navigate this ridiculous and terrifying and apocalyptic condition that none of us knew the end of, or the outcome, or whatnot. But checking in every day. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We got to make sure this. When they started to open it up to social interactions, the how many people could come in at any one time. Just sort of really figuring out the things that we were allowed to do to get us into a public space was, something that was so impressive, obviously, to witness and to be a party of. And then to move it into something which was near and dear to my heart, which is allowing me to actually co-curate shows, come up with ideas that she would attach her wagon to, and in some way that, was, it wasn't like, Eric, that's a really dumb idea, and I think, I have my own agenda, and there was this collaboration that was there from the very start, agreed upon ideas about what this institution should be, that April and I wanted it to be, which is something that would be a way of attracting people who don't have art as part of their lives to come in and feel comfortable being here, feel comfortable asking the questions that they feel stupid asking, et cetera, et cetera. That it was an inclusive environment that way. How to do shows that had, that sort of empowered the people coming in the door, because everybody has experienced humor. Everybody has an idea about what they like and don't like regarding that. Everybody has some a knowledge of cars. Whatever those things are that we did, we're sort of focused on finding the most exhilaratingly creative expressions of something commonly held by all of us, right? And so that collaboration I found incredibly fulfilling in the working. And as I think you could see earlier, before I got tired, that we actually have a very fun way of chatting with each other and pushing each other on, which is, part of the energy of the place itself. So, this is all by way of saying that you've made a big impact. I'm hearing from the public, from the artists, especially from the artists, that they're going to miss you terribly. Yeah. 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 There it is. Let's all, you can sit down. Yeah. Right? That's enough. That's enough. I mean, my God, come on. No, I just by ending with that ovation is that you obviously touched the community in a way that was the ambition of the place itself, and it's an incredible gift you're leaving behind, some foundation that you've created for us to build on and stuff. So, thank you.
I would like to say thank you. Eric, April, Eric.
We do the same thing.
I'm so grateful to you for this opportunity. Thank you so much for just the joy and the work and the excitement of this. So thank you so much. I'd like to thank the staff of the church who are extraordinary. I think that, I have nothing but huge respect for what you do and who you are, and you really don't know how hard these lovely, lovely people work. So Sam, Kristen, Sherry, Mallory, Janoy, and everybody, Kai, and everybody who is not here, thank you so much for being just extraordinary colleagues. And to that, I would like to add Kerry and Ward, who have installed all of the shows with us, and we couldn't have done it without them. And I'd like to thank the artists in the community. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for entrusting us with your art. Sorry, Joe, there in the background. I apologize, Joe. Please keep making the wonderful work that you do. I truly believe that art changes the world. So thank you to you.
One joke at a time.
One joke at a time. So let's keep laughing.
Yeah, bravo.